All right, it's a beautiful day. Hunt season just started. I've been out here fixing to get me some grouse. What's that? There's some young fellow here acting real strange. I'm gonna try and talk him down. Son, what's going on?
I'm stressed out.
About what?
Everything.
Why is that?
I don't know.
You know, you must have a disorder. I'm gonna learn you on some Unit 12 Meyer psychology for AP.
Oh, that sounds good.
Great, let's get started.
Hey everyone, Clark here. Unit 12 is about abnormal behavior, and in today's video, we're going to be diving deep into psychological disorders and talk about what they are, where they come from, and how we can learn from them. Let's start by defining psychological disorders. They're essentially just a collection of symptoms that disrupts an individual's normal way of thinking, feeling, their mood, behavior, or interactions with others, and come with significant distress that makes it really hard to function. Those thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that interfere with their day-to-day life are what's called maladaptive. And the causes of psychological disorders are equally complex and vary depending on the particular disorder and the individual. And only recently have we even begun to understand these disorders at all. In fact, for much of history, people believed that mental disorders were actually demons and evil spirits influencing people's actions. Their therapy, genital mutilation, trepanation, which is where you had a drill carved into your skull, isolation, or even transfusions of animal blood. The medieval ages were not just all about big paintings and palaces. People sucked at understanding how mental illness worked. Reformers such as Philippe Pinel pioneered the idea of moral treatment and cured illnesses with compassion instead of this crazy brutality. The medical model is the concept that psychological disorders have physical causes that can be diagnosed, treated, and in most cases cured through treatment in the right hospital. And this next term, I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the biopsychosocial approach actually is a really simple concept. This approach essentially just focuses on the fact that 3 factors in our lives result in us getting disorders: our biological, psychological, and social cultural factors. Biological factors could be someone's inability to deal with stress.
Abe, have you studied for the test tomorrow?
The test? No, I haven't.
You should.
Do you think you can help me?
No.
You think you can help me? You think you can help me?
A psychological factor could be that they have super low self-esteem.
Get her done. Come on, boy. I've seen better from a 6-year-old girl.
You're right, Coach. I do suck.
You suck.
And a social cultural factor could be that this individual attends a super competitive school. The key to this idea is that all 3 of these influences work together to create disorders. And within this approach, psychiatrists have also studied how environmental factors can influence gene expression. This study is called epigenetics, and it can play a big role in determining whether or not an individual gets a disorder. Psychiatrists can also classify disorders by using the DSM-5 system, which is the most widely accepted tool to classify disorders in the US and abroad. Classifying disorders can be more than just for organization. Identifying and classifying a disorder aims to predict where the disorder will take a person, how someone should be treated, and can prompt more research into its causes. However, DSM-5 cannot always help psychiatrists accurately diagnose patients. For example, the DSM-5 describes ADHD symptoms super vaguely, which is a big problem.
I think we can agree that most of us at one time or another thought that we had ADHD just 'cause we were running around with a bit too much energy.
While this increased awareness of the disorder is good, it means that people that sometimes just show high energy and a few symptoms are misdiagnosed as having a disorder they don't.
But another dangerous consequence of people making assumptions about psychological disorders is that disorder equals danger. The answer is absolutely not. Despite some political agendas, most violent criminals are not mentally ill, and most mentally ill people are not even violent. It doesn't help anyone to stereotype and label people with disorders. We're all human. Just remember that. When talking about the frequency of psychological disorders, the results vary from country to country and community to community. But unfortunately, the United States does represent the largest percentage of individuals with psychological disorders. Some factors that influence this are an individual's environment, who they spend time around, and even their level of poverty. In fact, conditions and experiences associated with poverty contribute to the development of psychological disorders. While some disorders can lead people into poverty, like schizophrenia, poverty itself is actually very likely inducing people with psychological disorders.
All right, everyone, let's move on. Now we're going to talk about anxiety disorders. So we've all felt anxiety before, right? Whether it's public speaking, a big sports game, or going in front of a camera for the first time, there are moments in our life when we feel anxious. But when this anxiety becomes persistent and distressing, anxiety disorders can form. For example, people who become anxious at social settings like dances or parties, we say they have a social anxiety disorder. Now, there are 3 kinds of disorders that Myers goes over, so we'll go through them to make sure you understand the distinctions between them. First, there is generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder is where a person is continually tense, apprehensive, and in a state of autonomic nervous system arousal. The reason this behavior is so hard to understand is because this anxiety disorder doesn't stem from a concrete place. It's just anxiety in general. So people with this disorder might have faster heartbeats, sweaty palms, and most importantly, all these symptoms seem to happen without reason. Next, let's talk about panic disorder. Now, this disorder is marked by unpredictable, minutes-long episodes of intense dread, in which a person may experience terror and accompanying chest pain, choking, or other frightening sensations, often followed by a worry over a next possible attack. This disorder can happen because of events that are very important to you. It could be a sports tournament or a big test, etc., etc. When this panic disorder gets out of hand, people can develop agoraphobia, which is a fear or avoidance of situations such as crowds or wide open places, where one has felt loss of control. Finally, we have phobias. Phobias are a fear or avoidance of some object, activity, or situation. And the best way to explain phobias is through a clip from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, where Professor Lupin shows the class a boggart, which is basically a creature that turns into your worst fear. So enjoy this little clip of Ron freaking out over a spider.
Concentrate. Pace your feet. Be brave. Wander the ready, Ron. Wander the ready.
Ridiculous.
Alright everyone, hope you enjoyed that. Let's move on from anxiety disorders and jump right into obsessive compulsive disorder, commonly referred to by its acronym OCD. Now there are 2 kinds of thoughts that occur: obsessive thoughts and compulsive thoughts, which is why this disorder is pretty easy to remember. The name pretty much explains what it is. Now people with OCD first have obsessive thoughts, which are thoughts that don't go away. Most of us can filter out thoughts and stop thinking about things after a while. You might have had a weird thought that went away, but people with OCD can't filter out those thoughts. Next, people with OCD have compulsive thoughts, where people can't help but take action on their thoughts. If you don't have OCD, you can easily differentiate. Yes, I thought this, and yes, it's okay if I do it. Or, yes, I thought this, but no, it's not okay if I do it. People with OCD simply act on their thoughts without checking their implications. The final disorder we're going to talk about is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, there are a lot of explanations for this, but I'm going to try to simplify them down. Basically, PTSD is when you experience something traumatic, like war, and weeks or months after, you still experience haunting nightmares, anxiety, and/or insomnia. Finally, we're going to talk about understanding anxiety disorders. Now, in order to understand these disorders, we have to break them down into conditioning, cognition, and biology. First, we have conditioning. The first kind of conditioning is classical conditioning, where our fear responses can become linked with formerly neutral objects and events. In a classic experiment, an infant, little Albert, learned to fear furry objects that researchers paired with loud noises. Now, this is actually taken right from the textbook, but if you want another example, let me offer one. So let's say there is a park that you love to go to, but let's say you witnessed something really traumatic, something like a murder, right? In the weeks after, normally you wouldn't have a problem going to this park. You love the park. But because you saw something so traumatizing, you're going to fear it. Next, there's stimulus generalization. When a person experiences a fearful event and later develops a fear of similar events. For example, if you're driving somewhere and you got hit by a car that was coming out of a side street, whenever you're driving and you see a car coming out of the side street, you're going to be anxious. You're going to have a fear. And finally, there's reinforcement, which basically helps maintain our learned fear and anxieties, right? Anything that enables us to escape a feared situation, we keep doing over and over again. So for example, a germaphobe might wash his hands to calm himself down. So whenever he feels anxious, he's going to revert back to washing his hands. The next way we understand anxiety disorders, OCD, and PTSD is cognition, which is basically our interpretations of actions. Now, Myers gives a great example, right? If you're about to go to sleep and you hear a creaky door, one person might interpret that as, oh, the door's broken. Or someone else might interpret that as, oh, there's someone outside my door, right? It's all about how we interpret certain things and whether those things freak us out. And finally, biology. Guys, the bottom line here is that genes matter, right? If your parents and grandparents have had certain anxiety disorders, OCD, PTSD, you are more likely to get those disorders. And in biology, we also have to study the brain because our experiences rewire the brain. So depending on our experiences, the brain can get rewired to form certain disorders. And finally, natural selection, right? Generations before us, humans may have feared something, but now as we've evolved, we don't fear those things, right? We have moved on. All right, everyone, that's all for this video. Frank and Abe, do the outro, and let's get out of here.
You hear that? My buddy just got him a grouse.
Whoa!
Now, what's this now?
What was that?
Son, you gotta calm down.
No, that was gunfire.
That shot was for a grouse, not a human.
Oh, just a grouse?
Just a grouse.
Oh, Jesus, you think I wouldn't be this stressed out? We just watched that video on PTSD.
I know. I think you need part 2 of the series.
You know what? I think you're right. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, we'll catch you guys next time.